Okay, I can't hear Luigi now.
Have you turned on the audio? Sometimes it's muted.
What, the audio where?
The audio on the YouTube.
On YouTube, okay.
Don't worry, I have paused it, so we will go whenever the audio goes for you. So on the link that I sent you, sei maggio 2020 in Dialogo Verso.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So it's play, and then there's an audio beside that. So
yeah, but do you not have to take that off, Conleth? Because I think I'm seeing the video of that.
You're seeing the video of that, but you don't see the audio of that. So did you open another tab?
Yes, I did.
And so in that, you turn up the audio there, and then you will hear that. And then we won't hear that. Do you hear it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so peace should be more than development. Development is not enough. So the economy of communion includes the poor, and it includes the poor of people who, we can't imagine a world in peace without an economy of peace. And so that's why we have these events of disarmed economy, of one of the villages for the economy of Francesco, which is about peace. So, and we'll have one of the protagonists of that here. So we think we're very much in tune with the week for a united world. And we are very happy. We have a great array of people who are very qualified, who are going to speak to us this evening. I think of them all. I think of them all in these very difficult times. I know that many of them are working in the different places, very difficult places. And we know that there's a destiny, so we're talking about working with women in prisons. So we're very happy to welcome Eugenia Scotti, who's a companion on our journey. And she brings a lot of professionality, and she's going to tell us all about the beautiful things that she's involved in. And we hope that we can continue to collaborate in the future. We're very happy. This is just an initial greeting. I would like to hand over to the various people who are going to speak. And today, after 2 months, when our Polo Leonello, the Leonello Business Park, has been in lockdown. So I was impressed to see this place surrounded by lovely roses, red and white roses. There was a real air of springtime. And so we hope that that's a symbol of the future. So Francesca, you're going to introduce us. We'd like to thank all those involved in the United World Week who have welcomed us and who are providing the translation in 3 languages. And so a very big thank you. And thanks to all the staff who are working for United World Week in Rome and on an international level. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to the people of the Leonello Business Park. Thanks very much, Luigino. Thanks that you're always with us. We really appreciate your support. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to the second part of our series, which wants to talk about the inclusive economy. And this is an evening of reflection of those who are involved in the Leonello Business Park and who are working for the Yes, that's just reminding that the translators need to try and keep up. So she's going to slow down a bit. So who's are the protagonists of this event? The Leonello Business Park, which supports the Economy of Communion project in Italy. It's a business park which contains businesses, offices, stores, and people who are involved in commercial activities. And then the other one is IPEC, which is the Italian Association for an Economy of Communion. It's a national network of people who adhere to the project, and it promotes collaboration between businesses and it supports social projects. So to underline what Luigino has said, I would like to underline the fact that every economic conception is the result of a particular culture and of a precise vision of the world. So the experience of the economy of communion, as Chiara Lubich has indicated, represents a passage from a spiritual level to a concrete proposal and to a revolution in economic activity, which is based above all on social relationships and fraternity. We've already lived 20 years or more of history, of results, of challenges. New synergies have come about, and together with many other people, we are giving life to prophetic initiatives, and we are beginning international processes which are very important. For example, prophetic economy, the economy of Francesco, which we've all heard about. So I'm like to think that today we could talk about another project, a wider project, which protects and is a promoter of that culture of unity, but is intertwined within a kind of a bigger contamination, which according to me could see the C of the economy of communion, as well as meaning communion, because we know that if economy is not communion, it's not going to lead anywhere. So the opposite of communion is division. So this is very important. But the C could also stand for community. And therefore, it could refer to a wider network, which takes in various environments, the profit sector, the non-profit sector, ecology, health, agriculture, in order to go together towards a radical change of economic paradigm. So from after the first evening with the people involved in the economy of communion and their experiences, this time we would like to widen our gaze and speak with other partners who join us on this journey. And we'd like to invite people involved in cooperatives and associations, friends of ours, to tell us about their experience. And why did we make this choice? Why did we decide to invite these people to give their testimony? Well, first of all, because as Luigino said, this evening is within the context of the United World Week, which is a kind of a global expo. It's a marathon of events promoted by young people of the Focolare movement, meetings of people from different places, workshops. There's over 1,000 events taking place in this week in 80 countries in 400 cities. And this year the theme is peace, human rights, human dignity. And the slogan is in time for peace. So we're at the level of peace and human rights. And we're going to hear stories which incarnate these values and which these are values which are above everything else. A second reason is linked to the fact that some of you, including myself and other young people, some time ago with social entrepreneurs, we have had strong experiences. And I remember very strongly a trip to Milan, where we started a group of young people of the economy of communion. We had difficulties, we had challenges, we wanted to live for a bigger project, and we really tried to do this. So we hope that this evening we can transmit to you a little bit of that optimism and that strength and the force of the impact that we have had. For example, we visited a factory which occupied by Rimaflo, which we'll get to know about. And we heard about the sacrifice and the struggles of Massimo and his collaborators. In a certain sense, they were abandoned by the system. And so Luciana will tell us about the project Made in Prison. And this getting to know a culture of disregard, of social rejection, underlining the synergy with the economy of communion, which is emblematic not only of the world president of the Association of the John Paul XXIII Association, who succeeded Don Benzi, but also became an individual member of IPEC, our association, and decided to join one of their cooperatives, their cooperative called Calabrone, and they gather best practices together with Half Full. But I'm going to stop here because I don't want to reveal everything to you. So now to moderate the dialogue, we're happy to have Eugenia Scotti from TV 2000 with her professionality, and she'll also be joined by Professor Vittorio Pelligra, who will give some links between the various business inputs and will underline from an academic and scientific point of view the good practices. So over to you. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. So, Vittorio, welcome. Well, first of all, thank you for having invented this wonderful occasion, which allows me to see many friends and allows me to be part of this wonderful international experience of the United World Week. I was part of it on many occasions wearing different hats, but now I'm happy to take part from a professional and point of view as an economist. So we are going to have a Zoom with which will tell some experiences which are characteristic, as Francesca said, of businesses, but not just businesses, businesses which have become communities and which generate a result and gain a recognition on a social level. So this Zoom will tell us about this reality. So I would just like to introduce this moment, and I'd like to take a zoom out, as they say, which is to give a wider view and which will allow us to see where to insert these individual experiences. And why? Well, because the fundamental tendencies of the world economy, because we're dealing at this level, will help us to understand the specific elements of these businesses and the experiences which in some way provide a capacity for this experience to bring about change, a change which is contagious. So let me give you some examples. I remember last summer in August, there was a document issued by the Business Roundtable, which gathered 200 businesses, important American multinationals, Amazon, and various of the most important ones, and 191 administrators signed a document where they committed themselves to change the world of management, to change the practices, to change the direction of their businesses, in particular, referring to the relationship with the environment, the relationship with the workers, and the relationship with the community within which these businesses are situated. There were many reactions in various countries People were saying capitalism is over, but of course, there were changes. This is not the only one. A few weeks later, there was a very important issue of the Financial Times, which is a very important paper. And they gave the example, they said that capitalism needs to be reset. It's time for capitalism to start again. Something has blocked the system of capitalism, and now is the time to start again. And the third element, the University of Chicago organized a survey of the most important European economists. And what came out was that 82% of these economists who were at the level of government consultation and so on, and they could see that the inequalities and the social issues caused by the model of capitalism. And they saw that these represented a serious threat for businesses. So if we put all of these three symptoms together, we can understand that there's something changing and something needs to change. So what is it that's changing? Why did these big businesses decide to become more responsible and to direct themselves in a more ethical direction? Not because their administrators became good from one day to the next, but they were trying to anticipate a tendency which can already be seen and which is having an impact. This tendency, there are various tendencies. For example, all the businesses, in order to be able to function, need finance. They need a continuous flow of investment, which allows them to function, which allows them to develop. And big businesses receive this finance from the funds of investors, where investors put their savings into these funds, and the business people try to manage them in the most profitable way. And these funds have a very key role in managing riches, in managing these businesses. And what happened in many of these funds, and the most important ones, they began to use them to distribute their investments, and with criteria called ESG, criteria which give a particular attention to the impact of business on the environment, on society, and on the kind of management that they are using. So what does this mean? It means that these businesses today, and certainly in the future, will wish to have access to world investors, and they will need to direct their way of functioning in this direction. So, for example, in Europe, in the next 10 years, the volume of these investments will go up by 20%, 20 times. And half of the principal investors will have in their portfolios at least 50% of their products will be ethically oriented. So something very important is happening. And then a second thing is that there has been a generational change, which is very important. Parents are leaving their money to their children. And this transferal of riches is equal to a sum of about 30 trillions of dollars. So this transfer of riches to this amount, and what will happen? This riches will go to the young people. And we know they have a very different scale of values. So let's just think about the environment. What a greater sensitivity young people have to the environment. And what does this mean? That this money will become consumer at one stage, and on the other hand, invested to produce. And they will become more aware of this theme. And another tendency is that the businesses have understood that to be ethically focused has another advantage. It confers the possibility to select the most motivated workers. There are studies which show that if the business is focused on the environment, it attracts workers who are highly motivated, who are more motivated. And so this gives the workers the opportunity to gain more than they would earn working elsewhere. And what does this mean? This means that what we're really talking about is that we have to be prophetic in identifying these tendencies which are changing the world economy and are changing it in this direction. These changes are not automatic, they're not irreversible. They need to be guided. Each one of us can guide them, can help them along a bit. We can help them develop through the choices that we make of what we buy. My wallet allows me to reward one business as opposed to another. So I'm going to stop here. But this is to indicate that what we're going to hear today are not very different. In the wider scale of the world, these experiences are born from daily choices, from small daily choices at grassroots level. So I think that the businesses that we're going to hear from this evening, in their history, they have experienced this role of being pioneers, these having begun processes, having brought about changes which are not limited to their businesses, but which have a further effect. Well, thank you very much. And we'd like to thank Professor Vittorio Pelligra, who works in the University of Cagliari, and he's part of the Sofia University, and he's part of the Civil Economy School. So he's involved in several activities, and I hope that I have perfectly expressed your credentials. So as Francesca was saying, we are very interested in hearing from these heroes of economy, of prophetic economy, and we're going to get to know three of them, and then we'll hear other experiences. So I'd like to begin with Luciana Delle Donne, who is the founder of a business which started in a prison. She's a real volcanic personality. And I'd like to ask her to tell us what made in prison means. But to take a step back, Luciana is a top manager who has got involved in online activities in banking. And at a certain point, she said, that's it. I'm now going to get involved in prisons. So what was the reason for this, Luciana? So I thank you very much for this opportunity. For me, it's very enriching because the Vittorio has just given us some keys which are fundamental because they coincide precisely with what I feel myself. And to sum it up, to do good, this is what has motivated me to choose a different kind of life, a second life. In my first life, after 22 years of working in a bank, I was at the top of my career in the financial world, and I created the first online bank in Italy. This was in the year 2000. In 2004, I felt that I wanted to get involved in something else. It was a desire to be useful and to give the opportunity to other people who don't have the same opportunities that I have had in my life. And I wanted to give a chance to people who had made mistakes, to people who needed a push. And so I chose to completely change my life, to give up riches and certainty, to dedicate myself to something innovative in the social sector. So before I was involved in the technical world, I was involved in banking, and I thought that my competencies could be used to help people who needed a push, who I thought I could put some petrol in the engine of some people when that engine had stopped. Well, I have a great joy in seeing people who are happy, and I thought I could dedicate myself to the last, to those who are invisible, and I chose to help mothers of children who have been abandoned to their own fate since they don't have mothers to look after them anymore. So I thought I would offer this opportunity to change to people who are in prison. On one side, we involved people in prison, we educated them, we employed them, and today we have other projects. We have 3 workshops with women, and then there's one for minors, one for girls, one for boys. We work with textiles, but we respect the planet, and we use recyclable materials, which other people reject. So we make gadgets which are personalized with materials which have been recycled within the prison. And so we have many people who help us to help the people when they go out of prison or even before they go in. Because if we don't help them along the way, they get lost, they lose their way. So all people tend towards good. They don't want to commit crimes, but being in prison lowers self-esteem. And so we want to help people to tend towards good so that whoever is in prison doesn't return to prison. Whoever has never had a work experience, anybody who has never had a work experience continues to commit crime. So then we have an economic disadvantage because there's a huge amount of investment into every prisoner every year. 2 questions, Luciana. So help us to understand, in how many prisons do you work with, how many people, and what for you is the biggest advantage, biggest satisfaction? Well, I'm satisfied on a daily basis because it's a real training ground for life where we learn the sense of life. The biggest satisfaction is when we bring this model of regenerating economy from a closed world to a greater environment, to bring about a systemic change. So for example, if we are talking about this year, a very important project is starting with another association where we have 17 partners in the south of Italy. And there are 11 workshops. There are dressmaking, food and agriculture, because we also make biological biscuits in the prisons. We have about 25 people who are prisoners, maybe even 30 because they change. Then we have 10 people who work outside. And this is a very important year for us. Before what has happened, because we have two important projects. One is linked to the University of the Dominican Republic, which chose us to educate their educators. So the University of the Dominican Republic will come to Italy and we will go to them to exchange our expertise and to help them to create this model, which is linked to the environment and to social inclusion. Another very important project is the well-being project, which I'm very happy to have heard Victorio, because he is really in line with what we would like to do. We no longer want to speak about products which are within the financial system, but products which are well-being for society. So we want to monitor the social impact we make with people. We're talking about dignity, we're talking about awareness, we're talking about self-awareness, we're talking about self-consciousness, which people gain. So all the people, the particular person, and all of the nucleus around them, because we work with the person, with the community, with the environment, and with the global impact. Our desire is to transfer this model to convince everybody that doing good is good for you. So Francesca earlier on mentioned this, and we'll come back to you later to hear what you're doing today, to hear about your living this emergency. So who's behind you there? Well, or what can I see behind you? These are all bracelets. Afterwards, you can show us, which we personalize, and we put phrases, we put the names of companies, we sell them, and with the profit, we pay the wages of the women prisoners. So I would now like to introduce to you the person who is responsible for giving life to another project. And it's about recuperating people, places, works. So Massimo, well, thanks to you, thanks to everybody. So I'm a bit emotional, but I'm a worker, and I lived, I have had the experience of losing my job because of globalization, that we're trying to change that system. So the business, it went through a crisis, the economic crisis of 2007. And then after that, it was transferred to Poland. And this, because of this, I ended up at home. So a group of us decided to stay in the factory. And that place of the factory was a place where in the 70s, where we could bring in the equipment and became a place of production. And then that place, what's it like? It became property of the workers, and the workers were always in that place. And then the place changed, and then the management changed, and then one went to one place, one went to another. But the workers were always the same, and they all tried to carry out the role as best they could. So they had many investors, and we were there, and we had a very special experience, because deciding to remain in a place, and everything happens there, that's the place, it has to be there. And if you decide that that place has to be a place which has been abandoned, then you can't go against that law. So we were some time ago, we had, I'm sorry, I'm very emotional and it's very hard. So we tried to understand. We tried to understand what the reason for all of this was and to take action and to understand what the impact was on society. And so this abandoned place is no longer so abandoned because the workers remained. And so this has been kind of a solution. So what now is the project? So, well, when we're in the factory, we realized that we didn't know how to work together because we all had our different specialities. And we had our different expertises. One looked after the logistics and one looked after the manufacturing and there were many misunderstandings between us. So then what do we say? Let's open up the factory and and inside this place, it became a place for everybody. It became, we had a second-hand shop and we had a whole sector that we could, sector for a borderline, he's calling it. So second-hand markets, half legal, half not. And there was a tendency to recuperate, to repair, and to manage all of these projects in a different way. So maybe we could say that the question has given many opportunities to the local area because it's become a place where people who lost their jobs were able to find employment. So maybe you could explain people who, can you tell us how you recovered your sense of community, especially against the culture of rejection? Well, there were Pope Francis. He organized the popular movement. I was there in 2014, and it was really against this culture of rejection. When the manager decided to go to Poland, he abandoned the factory. He left us all in the street. And so it started with this. It started with people trying to, this community today has built up this project, this town. How many people do you employ? Well, yesterday we took on 4 people from the 4 boys from the prison to make masks. And so we took on this person who's looking after the logistics, and we're trying to take on local people, and they're starting with a lot of difficulties because it's who was going to buy from the local people, from the farmers, to buy their vegetables, to buy their products, to buy the local produce. So people, they didn't have any way to sell them. So we're trying to approach them and to try to bring them closer to the town. and to give them a platform, an online platform, so that people can go and collect. So you're selling the products of the farmers, of the local farmers. So you have opened up a glimpse on the quality of the project, and we'll come back to that. But after having heard the experience of Made in Prison and of Massimo, I'd like to go back to Victoria. We have intuited and we've understood, thanks to the keys that you offered us at the beginning. But what's the value of economy, of sharing the experiences that we've heard? It's clear that recuperating people has a social, ethical, moral value, but it does also have an economic value. Well, of course it does. We say civil economy exists or it doesn't. And the real economy is civil economy. Because what is the difference? The difference is that all too often we have put on blinkers and we have looked at the world through the glasses of riches. But we should think about values. And this is very important because wealth has to be shared. And this helps us to distinguish economic activities which produce riches, but sometimes destroy values. And then there are activities which produce values and also riches. So, for example, we have the industry of the slot machines. And these are businesses which detract value from the community. They create wealth for a few. And this is the first point. And then not all jobs are the same. The experience that we have realized in a very strong way, more than I could explain in ideas, we are seeking meaning every day in our relationships with people and also at work. There's a recent study on hundreds of thousands of workers, which tells us that 25% of workers, especially young workers, think that their work is useless or damages. So what does this mean? For a young person to get up every morning, to go to work, thinking that what he's doing is useless or damaging, this sense that we are seeking, it's impossible to find in this situation. So I work because I need to eat, but my life is somewhere else. But I spend a huge part of my life at work. And to have a job that destroys my sense of meaning, that gives me a different view of life. So we have heard these experiences that man and woman, we look for meaning. And if we don't find meaning in a job, we'll look for it somewhere else. And then there's the question of the community. And this community of workers, of the group of women who are in prison, why do they need to work? Why? Because when they find a job, they find a recognition. They find that someone considers that person capable of producing value for others, because the job means doing things for others and with others. And this is an aspect which changes life. So that's why Luciana talked about the prison. People who are having this experience, they don't have the temptation to return to crime, to return to prison, because they have discovered another way in which they are recognized. So these are important aspects, and they contribute to create economic value. And so in some way, this schizophrenia that we have experienced over these years moments like this, for example, they try to bring back, to help us to understand the situation in a new way. That's very clear. Thank you very much, Professor. Now I'd like to continue, and I would like to hear from Enzo Zerbini. A little bit like Luciana, he had a very successful career in a company, and at a certain point, he went to work and to manage the Cooperative Calabroni of the John the 23rd Association. So I'd like to ask you why, and then can you tell us what the project is? Hello, hello. Well, first of all, I feel very close to Massimo. I feel that I'm a worker. I'm responsible for a cooperative in Calabroni, which is in Cremona. It started within the community of John the 23rd, started by Don Benzi. And within the aims of this association, I would say that the cooperative is part of cooperative to share the ideals of Pope John. There are 14 social cooperatives inserted in this, with many people who work in different sectors. So why are the cooperatives within the community? They started to give work to single mothers. The community exists in 45 countries in the world. In Italy, there are family homes, there are involved in communities, but a very complex aspect is that we try to give employment to the disadvantaged, to the people who have been rejected, who have been set aside, who have social issues or are disabled, who have had addictions. And we try to give dignity to every worker, to allow them to gain their dignity. So in our businesses, we try to employ 1 out of 15, but 1 out of 15 doesn't seem very much, but it's a very big challenge. Indeed, it's an incredible challenge. There's fear. Maybe I have a friend who comes to ask me, who says, out of 15, we have to take on one disadvantaged who works for 3 hours a day and who will cause us problems. So before you make a job offer, before you have to understand the situation. Many of the people who are responsible of the cooperatives are also responsible for family homes. So at the moment, I'm with my wife and a priest, and we are responsible for a family home with our 12 people with psychiatric problems. There are 12 of us all together. So we are living 24 hours together, and we see the qualities of all of these people. We understand their suffering when somebody slams the door in your face, how much they feel that their activity has no meaning. So we, within our community, we have this sensitivity. And so people who are disadvantaged come to you. Yes, people. So we have 2 social cooperatives. We have one of 2 types, A and B. One is educational and one is employment. So we have to have 30% in the education. And in our cooperative, how did it start? It started really on the basis of another cooperative, which started as a community and which carries out a very simple task. And there are people who realized that they had so many people come to the cooperatives, and many people go to the cooperatives to find products at a very low price. And this brings difficulties in the cooperatives, difficulties to respond, difficulties for those who consume, difficulties to increase our products. And so we have to be very careful how we function and how we give assistance. So Don Oresti Benzi, when I started in the community, he asked me to aim at the professional side. And I saw there the real charism of Don Oresti, because he wanted to work at a high level. He invited me to give up my job, to start in this cooperative, to invest in equipment, and to begin to work in precision engineering. So in this area, all of this precision engineering, with one machine after another, we were able to increase our activity with a lot of effort. And we weren't able to, in fact, we had to stop our assembly line because we weren't able to carry on. Today, the cooperative, which years ago, from the beginning, it was very complex, and the young people who arrived, we always said the Lord has sent them. So we tried to educate them. The first years we invested a lot in education, and today we work, we carry out various activities in technical areas and air conditioning units, different equipment. And within the cooperative, one who enters doesn't see departments where there are only disadvantaged. They see departments where everybody is working together. So the young people are supporting the workers. And this is very important because it means that the disadvantaged young people are able to carry out small assemblies. We have we have small effects for every machine we have. But at the same time, we have good relationships with the prison of Cremora, and we are beginning education, and we are trying the formation and trying to succeed in bringing ahead according to Article 21. So we have tried to bring ahead this education aspect of the cooperative. And there are different people who are working with us, working very hard, because work is a right, and we must allow these young people to find employment. So you said that the challenge is to within the cooperative, we have the average age is 35 to 37, and so we are. So from what you were saying, you have brought ahead and you have developed the whole project very much. So now we have met these three entrepreneurs, and I would like to invite Lucas Trevi to ask him to tell us what is this work of IPEC, of this Italian association, because you have written a book which is about good practice at the time of the coronavirus. So tell us about this, Luca. So hello, everybody. Can you hear me? So there's a different time zone there. So good evening, Luigino. So thank you for the invitation. So we are carrying out a research, and we've been doing it for years. And when I heard Professor Victorio talk about economy based on investment, because I have experience, and I really felt challenged when he started to speak about this, and I understood what he was talking about, but I had to kind of, so I have had my opportunity to meet somebody like Dawn Oresti, and I had a mystical experience, and I understood that there is a different world to which I could give a contribution. And so I tried to do this. So I came from Italy to India, and I created various networks which have involved young people in a dialogue, young business people, and also workers, teachers, education, people involved in education. And it's a network which aims to communicate positivity. And in the crisis, we saw that this virus was going to provide a big challenge. And this helped me to see the future. And I could see that things were going to be difficult. Schools closed, and then businesses closed to avoid contagion. So I was able to think about what was going to happen in a couple of months, when probably we would have to close down. We would not be able to support the workers and their families, and we would not be able to sell our products and our services. So I thought, let's talk to the business people of our network. Let's try to increase the network. Let's try to enrich ourselves reciprocally, and to include all these business people who are part of our network. And let's try to find a way to find some initiative which gives sense to this moment, because I believe in this as the task of the business person has the same dignity as that of a worker. And a worker who carries out a trade or a task is a part of the mystery or the ministry of service. So a business person is a person who serves his business. And when he is very enlightened, this service is very wide-reaching and is at service of the community. Exactly, precisely. So what is the experience of good practice? So with regard to good practice, it's not only about solidarity, because the newspapers tell us about this. There are lots of interesting experiences in this moment of history. But in moments like this, the tasks of employment with regard to the crisis, we asked the business people to tell us how they responded to the crisis. What are they doing as a business person at this time? And there were many replies. We didn't expect so many. And the business people showed us a great creativity. And so sorry, Luca, don't tell us all the answers. We'll go and download your book. And where else will we find it? We want to download your book. It's free, isn't it? And we want to read it. So it's on the site of IPEC, and it's the IPEC Association is supporting it. So I don't know if I can tell you something, at least one example. Okay, we're very behind time. If you can tell me one example in a minute, then I can say, okay, go for it. So, well, I would like to tell you about Asimoko, which is a group of insurances which chose to use smart working. and they realized that smart working is limited. The difficulties of time, of space, of technology. So they said to their employees, when you have finished your job at home, and if you have time left over, because you should have time left over, use it to grow personally, not in your working competence, but something for you. So this is the approach of grow in what you feel is good for your own talent. They left the employees free to do this, and at the end they wanted them to tell and what their experience was. So this allowed the employees to have a greater security, a greater self-confidence, not only as employees, but as human beings. Well, thank you very much. You've given us a great glimpse of hope. Thank you. Francesca, I'm going to go back to you and ask you to give us another point of view. Okay, I can't hear them. He's very faint. No, I've got him yet.
E l'altra, le cose belle.
So these are beautiful things.
Sono due cose che fanno parte della nostra storia. Una bellissima da Simoco, no? Cioè, ha scritto detto Gui in un bellissimo articolo su Città Nuova.
So I have a couple of things to say. With regard to the economy of communion and the civil economy, I think that there are two important phrases which are part of our heritage. Man is not his error. And the other, beautiful things, the sooner you do beautiful things before you think about them. And then I would like to say that there's a great article in the Italian News City. These sectors of economy which have not lost in this epidemic. And so we're talking about as if we were we're talking about our cars, and we're at home and we're not using them. So I think that there needs to be a bit of compensation for these sectors which have lost a lot. And I think that this is communion, because we are insurance of cars, and we're only using our car once every fortnight to go to do the shopping for a short time. It's not like it was before. I wanted to make this comment, but I'm not expecting an answer. I just so excuse me, Luigino. We're very open and we're trying to improvise about management questions. Let me go back to Professor Peligro and tell me, can you bring us to the economy of Francesco? We're talking about businesses, we're talking about workers, we're talking about young people. We know that the event has been postponed. We know that you are coordinating one of the villages in this economy of Francis. Can you tell us very briefly, because we are approaching the end of our transmission, can you tell us something about this appointment? Well, the link with what has been said about the economy of Francesco is the theme of waste, or of people being discarded. So Pope Francis has underlined a lot this theme, and this idea of waste or rejection is relative. It's discarded, maybe because you don't know what to do with the thing. You don't have the imagination to find something to do with it. And I remember a friend, an artist, Ciro Cipollini, who creates. And for him, nothing is wasted because he is able to create art and poetry out of anything. So there is no waste. And the same for business, who are able to give value to rebuild the environment, to rebuild work around the people that they have. They can be specialists, they can be less people for many reasons. It's the culture of waste that's the problem, not our being different. And here we have the great challenge of Pope Francis, of the economy of Francis, this appeal that he desired to launch to thousands of young people throughout the world, business people and entrepreneurs, change makers, people who are animating communities, and he wants to invite them to make a pact for an economy of communion. But the fact that young people from all over the world are involved, young people and not so young, people who in some way are already involved, who are already getting their hands dirty in economy, people who have finished their studies or who are about to, and people who are getting in, who want to build, who want to develop the ideas of economy over the next few years. And the Pope would like to meet these people and to have a sharing and a dialogue, at the end of which he wants to make a pact which implies, which has as a content, a dimension, which has an institutional dimension, which is a proposition and a request, a very high appeal to institutions, but also a personal commitment. So we will emerge from this experience with a commitment, which each one of us will take and which will come from the dialogue that we all have together. So it's individual people who are communicating with a wider economy. And I would now like to have another round. We have talked about today, we've talked about the pandemic, we've talked about what we're living. I'd like to ask everybody very, very quickly to give an idea of what in this emergency, what are you doing in your business, in your cooperative? What are you saying to your people? What do you consider fundamental in all the possibilities that could happen? Luciana. Well, as we were saying before, we have started a couple of ambitious projects which are involving our people. At the beginning of March, we were put into quarantine and we had to stop our activities, and we all had to respect that. But we saw that in the prisons, there were a lot of problems, and people felt that they had to try to help the weakest. And we made almost 10,000 masks, which we gave to the poorest people, to the farmers, to the immigrants in Sicily, to care homes. And so to anybody who asked us, we gave masks, and especially to prisons. So it was a moment. It was a very strong moment of communion, because the women were able to sew the masks, and we were able to sew the masks for the prisoners, to save the weakest, to save the fragile. And then we had a very innovative approach. We carried out as much as we could, and we tried to collect funding. And we felt that immediately we were invited to help the people who were forgotten, and these people who are the reason for my being. So we are continuing to do good, because by helping the weakest, by helping them to move up to a greater stage of well-being, this helps everybody. And so this moment of great emergency has been an opportunity to allow us to help the people who have been forgotten. So everybody can give something, everybody, even those who were considered, as Professor Pellegro said, those who have been rejected. So Massimo, what can you tell us other than what you've already said about your experience with the masks? Well, with regard to the emergency, for us, after a fortnight, nobody was able to work, and we immediately got together and we tried to do something for the town. And we invited people to, we said, we're ready to start again. We're ready to sew masks, and we're ready to work with others and with people on a voluntary basis, people who have experience. And so we started within a week to find, we had no sewing machines, and we tried to find equipment among the people that we knew. We wanted to do something, and then we worked together with the prisoners, and we tried to start, and with them we organized a dressmaking shop, a sewing shop in the prison, and we were able to work with them. And so we were able to work with some of the prisoners, and these masks have, we have been able to produce them, and we have been able to distribute them wherever around us there was need to do so. So can I add something? May I interrupt? Excuse me. I would like to, we have been in touch, because by collecting material from many companies, we were able to distribute it to other sewing shops, and we were able to work with Massimo, and we were able to send him material and send him products if they wanted to use our model or to use their own. And so this was, and he has the material which we are sending him. So thanks very much. So that's great that you're already linked up, you're already in network. And so how are you living the emergency? How are you living in Calabrone? So we were very close. Many of us were in the red zone, and so we immediately felt that we felt the impact of the situation. And then the prisoners that came from prison to work with us on a daily basis, they weren't able to come anymore. And so it was a very interesting, important moment, because we had workers within the cooperative, and many of the girls who were living in our family homes with fragile situations, they suffered a lot, because they were at risk of contagion. And so we stopped immediately. And those who continued to work were really, they took in hand the production, and they really did whatever they could to try to support and to work within the emergency that we were experiencing. So we had this emergency situation, and we tried to get the government subsidies. We tried to overcome the situation because now it's a human emergency and we have to prepare ourselves for an economic emergency that will be difficulties to face. And so the very immediate emergency within our community and within the whole community, within our care community, we need masks, we need equipment, we need protection equipment, and we will have crisis. And you always come out of crisis with new projects, with new ideas. And this is what every year we have tried to do. So how do you come out of the crisis? Sorry for interrupting you. I'd like to go back to Professor Peligro. Can you tell us about the idea of crisis and gift, about coming out of a crisis in a new way? Can you comment on this to conclude our meeting before we will finish with a final thought from Francesca? So crisis and gift. Now, this tragedy, this pandemic will leave us with a mark which we will never forget, our generation, our children. And one of the very important aspects is that we have all felt that we were one, because this pandemic, we are in some way, we have all been involved and we have all been called to think about the others, because this challenge in these weeks, the idea of the common good, of a global good, the virus is not democratic. The virus affects the weakest, the most vulnerable, and this leads to a growth in community. And the unity of this, the common gift in this moment when we're seeking immunity, we're seeking protection from contagion. And so this point of view helps us to understand that true immunity is in community. And it's by trying to resist the virus, this biological virus, but also the cultural virus, which can affects us often. And it's often in our ability to create community. So these experiences we have heard are beautiful. This building up of networks, this giving life to a network of cooperation, it's very impressive. It has been very impressive over the months, these last couple of months. And a final comment, this experience of cooperation, this experience of a great movement, which starts in Italy with our specific product, which is based on the idea of inclusion. And we should be proud of this, and we should protect it and value it. And this heredity that we have received from the past, we should give it new life and we should give it new energy. So it's not by chance that the experience that we have heard takes on a particular juridical format, as we have heard. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Peligro, for these opportunities, these insights. Thanks to everybody who has taken part. Thanks to the translators who have allowed us to speak to the whole world in many languages. And thanks to the Leonello Business Park, to IPEC, and it's been a pleasure. Thanks to everybody who was following us, and thanks to Francesca, who's going to finish by reading us some thoughts of Chiara Lubich. So thank you very much for, of course, there's not time to go into depth about everything, we were glad to be able to transmit, even if we weren't able to go into a lot of detail. But in this time of crisis, we are happy to be able to to distribute some goods to some families, and there are a lot of stories of resilience, and so we'll have to have a marathon someday, Francesca. So my final words, and I would like to thank everybody on behalf of the Lionello Business Park. I would like to, we met a few years ago with Massimo, and I was able to intuit the difficulties that you've lived, the dynamics, and in sharing this story, I saw it wasn't easy. And I'd like to thank you, myself and all the young people that have met you, because we could read between the lines. But the dream of that time was to have a city of employment, and I think that it's happening. And I think at this time we have seen that craft work and work of a basic level is very important. And thanks to everybody who has shared their experience. So this reading, which is prophetic from Karel Luebig, we thought it was very relevant to everything that we are living. The title is The Attraction of Modern Times. This is the great attraction of modern times, to penetrate to the highest contemplation while mingling with everyone, one person alongside others. I would say even more, to lose oneself in the crowd in order to fill it with the divine, like a piece of bread dipped in wine. I would say even more, made sharers in God's plans for humanity, to embroider patterns of light on the crowd, and at the same time, to share with our neighbor shame, hunger, trouble, brief joys. Because the attraction of our times, as of all times, is the highest conceivable expression of the human and the divine, Jesus and Mary, the Word of God, a carpenter's son, the seat of wisdom, a mother at home. So with this frame, this gives a framework to our dialogue, and we'd like to say good night, and we'll see you the next time on the 20th of May, and we will be part of the celebration for the Laudato Si encyclical. So we'll deal with the theme of integral development, of the environment, of themes, and we'll continue to highlight the positive that is going on. So good evening and continue well. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Ora dobbiamo resistere, perché quando diventa lunga la maratona, diciamo, dopo che si passa.
When the marathon becomes long, when it can be, when you get to a certain point, it's very hard to get to the end. So let's take courage. Let's go on.